Trying to suck the venom out of a snake bite, it doesn't matter what kind of snake it is absolutely useless. I'm Dr. Sara Ruane, and I'm the Assistant Curator of Reptiles and Amphibians at the Field Museum in Chicago, Illinois. Today, we're gonna look at snake attacks in movies and judge how real they are.
What the?
I think a snake could end up in someone's luggage accidentally and then it gets out, or it could be just stowaway somewhere in the plane itself. Snakes are pretty good at getting into really small places, and they are really secretive, so they could be there for a long time and you just wouldn't even know it. There's so many species of snakes in this scene. They are a mixture of harmless snakes that aren't gonna cause any problems for anybody. So those are milk snakes falling out of the ceiling, maybe a corn snake, some of the most common pet snakes that people keep. Even if a snake isn't venomous, one of the ways it'll defend itself when it is cornered is by striking and biting. Snakes actually have pretty weak jaw musculature with respect to chomping down because they don't chew their food, they swallow everything whole. If the snake doesn't have fangs, if it's not venomous and all it has are these tiny little teeth and it was to bite down on you, it's really not that big of a deal.
Yes, sir, I'm soaking lays with it. The pheromone will make these guys go f***ing crazy.
The use of pheromones to make these snakes act so wild is not realistic. Pheromones in snakes are very poorly understood, but pheromone work has been done across squamates, which is the group that contains snakes and lizards, and so some work on geckos has shown that they absolutely do use pheromones to communicate. Typically, pheromones are going to have a lot to do with mates, finding mates, mate selection, maybe even combat between males versus males or females versus females over potential mates. But as far as being aggressive towards other species, that is really unlikely. I'm gonna give Snakes on a Plane a 4 for realism. I like that there are actually some real snakes used in the movie, but the behavior of these snakes is a really bad look for snakes and totally inaccurate. A human can outrun pretty much every snake that exists. Flat out, an anaconda certainly can't chase down a person. This anaconda has a lot of upper body strength that a real anaconda would not be able to muster up, particularly out of the water. Anacondas are primarily aquatic, and they reach massive, massive girths, and one of the reasons they're able to do that is because they live in the water, and the water supports that body weight. So the anaconda in this movie seems gargantuan in size. It seems maybe that it's somewhere in the 40-foot range, and although anacondas are thought to be able to approach approximately 30 feet, the reality is that as far as legitimate documentation that has not been questioned, 20, 25 feet is a lot more realistic. If they are on the larger side and you are by yourself and one was to wrap around you, you need a second person there to get out of that. It wouldn't be undoable if you have a second person who can start unwrapping the snake, but by yourself, you actually are pretty limited in what you could do to get out of that situation. Snakes typically that constrict are going to fully kill whatever it is they're trying to eat before they start actually consuming it. By constricting their food first, then it takes away the ability for the prey to do anything. In reality, that snake is going to be taking its time when it's feeding, and given the way snake skulls are put together, it's not a simple process. People talk a lot about snakes unhinging their jaws when they feed, but the reality is that their jaws are not actually attached to start with. So the upper skull is all one piece, but the lower jaws actually sit in a little groove on each side. The lower jaw of a snake is the same thing, where it can stretch out very, very wide. And so this stretchy ligament allows the snake not just to open its jaws very wide horizontally. In this clip, when the snake is feeding, it seems to just be gulping down the human. But in reality, in order to pull that person down into their digestive tract and down their throat, that snake is actually going to be using one jaw at a time. And then once it really gets down into the throat where there's a lot of musculature, it can start using those muscles and the same way that we swallow something, but it takes a while before that sort of natural reflexive action takes over. So I give Anaconda a 4 because the way that Anaconda moves around and its speed is incredibly unrealistic. Anacondas are not out looking to eat people anyway. What we're seeing is a mixture of sort of heavy-bodied snakes, boas and pythons, and then a bunch of legless lizards that aren't snakes at all. Snakes are just a kind of lizard, and so if we were to look at a family tree of snakes and lizards, snakes are just within it. The snake sitting there like that and looking defensive but not really doing anything is pretty accurate. Snakes are doing almost everything in their power to not bite. Venom is only used defensively as a secondary defensive system. Snakes primarily use venom to acquire prey and to kill it in a safe way. To avoid getting bit in a situation like that, staying still is a good strategy to start with. Staying calm, no herky-jerky motions. Anything that's going to startle the snake is more likely to make it bite because it's going to get scared. And then just trying to back away very slowly and calmly would be the next step. So that's a python, and it's just hanging out. That seems pretty realistic. That's what most snakes do. Most snakes, even if you're up close in their face, are going to remain pretty calm if they can avoid having to do anything. One of the best ways snakes defend themselves is by not moving and hoping you don't really see them. I'm going to give it a 5. What I like about this clip is that the snakes, for the most part, are acting the way snakes do. These snakes are mostly just minding their own business. Maybe they are striking a little bit when Indiana Jones is actually kind of harassing them, but even the cobra doesn't do anything, and that's really quite realistic. I have to take some points off because most of the animals in this clip aren't snakes at all.
Can you hear me?
Snakes really don't hear the way that we do. If you have a pet snake, you're not going to teach this snake its name and it's going to look up at you and recognize that you're even talking to it. That being said, snakes can feel vibrations, particularly through their lower jaw bones, so they can feel something like a footfall. And there is certainly evidence that snakes do hear super, super low frequencies, but the human range is not something that snakes are picking up on. Flicking their tongues is how snakes are tasting everything in their environment and bringing those odor molecules back into their mouth and letting their brain process what it is that's around. So even if they can't see it, they are able to sense when something is there, whether that's something to worry about, like a predator, or whether it's something to be excited about, like maybe a potential mate, or whether it's something to eat. This snake is in a zoo environment. It's probably incredibly used to people, and it's probably very well fed. If I was to fall in there, I would just keep an eye on the snake and just calmly get myself out, just climb on back out. They act the way I'd expect people to act, jumping on furniture, trying to get out of the way. If a snake wanted to do something to a person, though, because it felt defensive or whether it thought it was going to eat somebody, which is really unlikely, climbing up on something is probably not an effective way to get away from it. But again, you could just kind of walk away quickly. The snake's not likely to follow you. It portrays the snake as very calm and docile, which is pretty realistic. The blinking, the hearing, that's not accurate whatsoever. But because they portray the snake so nicely, I'm still going to give it a 6. That snake in the clip looks like it is very deliberately coming over, sinking its front 2 fangs only into her with the express purpose of biting her. And that's a really weird thing to try to portray because that's really not how snakes bite. They're going to engage both their upper and lower jaws and bite fully. In the United States, getting bit on the hand or on the ankle or leg tends to be where people get bit the most. Cutting a cross or an X or a slash into a snakebite wound is something that you see even in medical advice for snakebite kits when you go back in time a little bit. But the reality is that doing that is only causing you more problems. What people think when they do that is they're gonna make a nice incision so they can start trying to suck that venom out and really get it all out there. Venom really needs to be injected into the circulatory system, into the tissue directly for it to be effective. And so you could, assuming you don't have any sores in your mouth or an ulcer maybe, something that's allowing that venom to get into you, you could eat snake venom and you would theoretically be totally fine. And that's what makes venom different from poison. Poison is something that you ingest it, you have to eat it, and then it is able to penetrate into your body through your stomach or through sublingually in your mouth. This character ultimately is unable to get help in time to totally negate the effects of the venom and ends up having to lose her arm. If somebody gets bit by a snake like a rattlesnake and is unable to get treatment relatively quickly, it's not a death sentence. However, that hemotoxic venom is gonna start eating away at the tissue where the bite site is, and it's gonna cause issues such as gangrene, rotting, and ultimately it may result in an amputation even if you don't die from it. So this is realistic in that this is what somebody might do if they saw somebody get bit by a snake, even if it's not the best treatment. So I'm gonna give this a 6. So that's not a boom slang whatsoever. This is a rat snake. This is not anything what a boom slang even looks like. It's probably the most inaccurate portrayal I've ever seen, given how many close-ups there are of a snake that's quite distinctive looking. They don't have teeth up in the front of their mouth that inject venom. Instead, they have these enlarged teeth in the back of their mouths. They do not have a sophisticated venom delivery system like a syringe, the way a rattlesnake does. Boom slangs were not known to necessarily be dangerous because they don't have these front fangs.
30 seconds before the venom does its thing.
You could get yourself a big syringe of snake venom 100%, because the way that antivenom is made, you have to get venom from the snake species you're targeting, and you do that by taking the snake, and it's called milking it, and basically under controlled circumstances, the snake is encouraged or forced to bite. Typically it's like a kind of a rubber sheet that is stretched over some sort of vial or cup, and the snake bites into it, and then the venom starts dripping down into the cup. Typically, when you see antivenom administered in a movie like Bullet Train, it's really not how it would go down in real life. Antivenom isn't just one dose and you're good. Typically, you are given a certain number of doses based on the severity of the bite and the symptoms you're having, specifically for the species or a group of species that that antivenom was made to work for, and you're monitored. And if you keep getting worse, they'll give you a little bit more. It's also ridiculously expensive. It's not something you're just carrying around. Having a dose of antivenom and then getting bit relatively soon afterwards, it might actually protect you from a subsequent bite. One thing I'll point out is that antivenom is very good at stopping the venom that's circulating in somebody's body, but whatever damage has happened typically isn't reversed. A boom slang is not a constrictor, and it's not necessarily going to wrap around something and really hold on tight. A rat snake, the snake that this looks like, can do something like that, but the snake's not gonna hang on for dear life given the opportunity to get away. I'm gonna give this a 1. I think this is one of the most unrealistic scenes I've ever seen. The snake isn't a boom slang. The behavior of the snake is not anything like a boom slang. The antivenom and how they portray it working is totally unrealistic. This is the worst one. For accuracy. A snake definitely would be able to sort of lunge forward and bite someone in the face. Mambas are really big, or they can be really big. They move pretty fast. They do spend some time climbing around, and so they do have pretty good ability to come right at someone's face from that angle. That would not be impossible. It is possible that the snake would feel pretty worried and defensive being surprised by a human, which from the snake's perspective is probably going to try to kill it, because that's usually what people try to do to snakes. Most snakes posture and only bite when they're really pushed towards it, but it's certainly not impossible.
Bud, I'd like to introduce my friend, the Black Mamba. Black Mamba?
Somebody probably wouldn't so instantaneously be feeling that bad. I mean, they'd feel it, but it wouldn't necessarily be just fall on the floor instantaneously bad from a mamba bite. Venomous snakes come in two main flavors. You can have a snake that's neurotoxic with respect to its venom or hemotoxic. And black mambas fall into the general category of neurotoxic. Neurotoxic venom is going to cause your nervous system to start shutting down. And this occurs because the venom molecules sort of glom on to our sodium-potassium channels and make it so that they don't pump efficiently. And that's what causes you to have things like paralysis, your diaphragm stops being able to function, and so you can essentially have no ability to breathe anymore. This is not a bad clip with respect to realism. I'm gonna give this a 7. With snakes like rattlesnakes, I'm always going to be very, very, very cautious with how they're handled, and I'm never gonna just pick up a rattlesnake like that. No herpetologist who doesn't wanna end up in the hospital would ever do that. When snakes bite, they typically strike, they make contact, and they let go pretty quickly. The only times where you see a snake hanging on like that is snakes have these recurved teeth, and so because they curve backwards, if they manage to kind of sink their teeth into something, sometimes they can get a little bit stuck. You do, in fact, have to kind of push them forward and unhook them because of those recurved teeth. That's not a thing that's gonna work. You could just do nothing and it would be as effective. Trying to suck the venom out of a snake bite, it doesn't matter what kind of snake it is absolutely useless. It just starts acting so fast and dissipating through the tissues, through the blood, that there's no time to start trying to suck it out. And it's not something that is like in a capsule where you can just get it all out in one big suck. Pouring alcohol on it is, I can't imagine it really matters. And it's certainly not gonna suddenly make the person sit up and be okay. As far as portraying what a rattlesnake looks like, it looks like a legitimate rattlesnake. As far as the behavior, as far as the way they're dealing with the bite, totally ineffective. I'm gonna give this a 5. There's no kinds of snakes, including cottonmouths, that are gonna congregate together to hang out on somebody just to bite them. If in fact that kid, say, tried to pick up a snake or fell on a snake and did end up getting bit, no other snakes would show up to check it out or get involved. That would never happen. And the snake that was responsible for the bite, the second it was no longer feeling threatened or was being harassed, it would take off and get out of there.
What time is it?
14!
Yell it out every 10 minutes.
Using that Sharpie and getting the time is tracking how the venom is progressing through the kid's system and seeing how the swelling is progressing. And that can be something useful. Typically, you see that more in snakebite treatment once the person's already at a hospital so that they can see if the effects of the venom are being slowed down and that it has been essentially stopped by treatment, typically by antivenom. But it's not that's not a bad thing to do. The progress of the snake venom and the swelling progressing through the kid's leg, that seems pretty legitimate. You're gonna have swelling, your cells are gonna start doing all sorts of crazy things, lysing, popping open, hemorrhaging. I'm gonna give this a 9. The snakes themselves are not portrayed particularly accurately in their behavior, But saying, let's get this person to the clinic and then just going to some actual trained medical staff is absolutely the right answer. And so for that reason alone, this gets probably the highest rating I could give. My favorite scene watching these clips today is Indiana Jones. This is a movie I've seen before, but it's only now in retrospect watching it, seeing that all of the snakes in the movie, for the most part, are actually just legless lizards. I found it pretty charming. It's fun trying to identify actual real animals versus something like Bullet Train where it's totally inaccurate. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, why not slither on over to the next one?